What's up, guys? So let's just dive right into Westworld because, like I said yesterday, that episode was absolutely fantastic. It's probably one of the best episodes, if not the best episode of the series. It was so good. And interestingly, or perhaps not interestingly, it may have had to do with the fact for me personally that Dolores was not in the episode at all. I find her character to be extraordinarily trite this season, and I don't really like what they're doing with the character so much. It's not a great character transformation. Again, if they're trying to make her the villain, I understand where they're going, but I just don't prefer the way that they're characterizing her. And before I continue any further, spoilers ahead for Westworld Season 2, Episode 4, The Riddle of the Sphinx, which is actually a pretty interesting episode title. They're all, plays on each other. The Riddle of the Sphinx is, what walks on four limbs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, and three legs at night, and the answer is man. Child, adult, elderly person. Elderly person like Kane for the third, in case you didn't know. Obviously, you can see the parallels there in kind of how they show a variety of different characters, particularly Papa Delos being, his subconscious being supplanted into a new body, and him constantly breaking down and having issues and sort of having these problems and not being able to survive in this host body. I think it's definitely something worth exploring, and I think that the actor for Delos did an absolutely incredible job in terms of showcasing kind of how a robot, a computer, a sort of sentient AI would sort of react when its programming is sort of confronted with something that's like directly conflicting what it should be doing. And just having William come in and go out and come in and go out and show all those different scenes with him as he continues to try and have him gain more and more sentience, and more fidelity, as he calls it, was just really gripping and really moving. One thing that I did think was kind of strange is timeline-wise, if I had to guess, it seemed like he had lived, or William had aged at least 10 years, if not 15 years, but let's say 10 on the low side. And at the end, when they find him, he's the 149th subject, right? And so it said he was on day 35. And he had already been there for 7 years in a previous flashback, and they could only get him to 7 days. So 7 years is, I can't do math that quick, but it's over 2,000 days. And so 7 goes into 2,000 way more than 149 times. So I am curious. That seems strange that it was only 149, which is like a minor detail, right? It's not something that's particularly important, but they made it seem like it was such a long time that had passed. I'm saying 10 being conservative. Honestly, I feel like it was like 15 to 20 years that it had passed. Since they had been trying. Like, there was the assistant switch, like the girl got switched for the guy. Like, I assume that was meant to show that so much time had passed that person was no longer like the caretaker of this facility. But they only had 149, and at 149 he'd only lasted a month. And then he said, like, yeah, another few years they might figure it out. So that would indicate to me that 35 days was like pretty close to being able to like crack the code. So I just thought that was strange. But yeah, those scenes were so good. Definitely called that he was in the park. Definitely called that he was, a robot immediately. It's like, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like getting into Westworld's like mind. But big thing, Elsie still alive, which we kind of got hinted at a little bit earlier. I'm curious, though, because a lot of people had assumed that Elsie was controlling the Ghost Nation. And that's why the Ghost Nation seemed to only be interacting with humans and not hosts. But we see, A, that's not true, and we also see, B, the Ghost Nation seems to have captured all those humans and then seemingly let them all go. Obviously, Grace ended up running away from them, but even like Stubbs and all them, just they all got let free. So I'm curious where they're going to take that, because I actually can't remember if Ghost Nation was Ford's people, like if Ford had created that narrative, or if I can never remember that dude's name, but like character dude, the guy that's with Maeve, if he created the Ghost Nation, because that seems like an interesting storyline to continue to go through. So then we move on to, I'll go ahead and talk about Grace being William's daughter, Emily. So they're thinking her name is Emily Grace and that she just goes by Grace. The big reveal at the end, hi, Dad. Pretty much everyone, I think, had kind of assumed that was going to be William's daughter. There's a going theory that she's trying to, like, take down Westworld. Which is strange to me that she seems to know so much about it, because there was another theory that the guy that she was talking to, who was in all white, was Logan. Turns out that's not the case. Logan overdosed on drugs, according to William, years ago. So we know his fate. It seems the whole Delos clan is dead except for Emily, really. Well, I guess technically Emily wouldn't be a Delos because she's William's kid, so the whole Delos, like, family is just dead. Some people thought that was him, and I thought that was kind of like a stretch, just because, like, why would they personify someone in all white and it be Logan? I also think it's kind of strange that theory about her trying to take down the parks, like, from within, just based on the fact that, like, if you hated your dad so much for, like, doing something for so long and you blamed him for your mom's death and everything, yes, you might try to take it down, but why would you? She definitely seemed like she was enjoying being there when she was in the Raj. So I'm curious to see where they take that story. Maybe they do have her try to sabotage everything, but I think she's going to be part of William's game for sure. But let's move on to Elsie and Bernard, the other, like, really main attraction of this. Elsie, Bernard is kind of like having, like, flashbacks and, like, having issues, and Elsie, I really like the way that they, like, explained that, like, your memories aren't addressed, there's no sequence to them, they're just kind of all floating around. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I like that they had addressed how his mind is kind of, like, falling apart. What I did think was kind of interesting, though, is that Bernard, she's like, you left me here with this and this, but Ford ordered Bernard to kill, or, like, take care of, I don't know what exact phrase he used, Elsie. So it would seem to me that either Ford ordered Elsie to be put there, or Bernard is acting of some sort of free will, right? Because until then, he even says in the episode, it's like, Ford's dead, I'm acting on my own now. But then how did you save Elsie unless Ford told you to save Elsie, right? And that's kind of something similar with kind of the way the rest of the hosts are interacting, right? Like Dolores, for instance, and Maeve. It's like we're kind of being led to assume that all of these have, like, their own sort of sentience now. They've gained sentience and they're not just sort of following a script. But I think it's strange that, like, Ford planned all of this. He planned this whole big game, and then he left enough pieces in the game to have variables. Ford just doesn't seem like that kind of person to me. He seems like he would definitely have planned all of that. So I'd be curious to see if they pull, like, another double switch, like kind of how they showed Maeve was supposed to go to the island and then she didn't. Like, all of that stuff was being programmed. I wonder how much of this is also programmed. But of course, Elsie and Bernard find the laboratory where they're fabricating people's consciousness. There's like the red velvet cupcake is what everyone was calling them on the tables, which we can presume are different than the host's sort of brain housing. That seems to be where, you know, they try to replicate a human consciousness and place it into it. And of course Bernard steals one, puts it in his pocket, and murders everyone in there. Which also seems odd. It made it seem like Ford told him to do that. So I'm curious to see, because Bernard now admits he doesn't know when his memories are happening. He even says when he's talking to Elsie, he's like, "Oh, I'm not even here with you right now, am I?" And I can't tell if that meant in the real world he was still back in the other room, or if he was like remembering something different. That didn't make a lot of sense, because he was then in the room with Crazy Papadelos and Elsie, so he was there. Was he just not in the room? Was he just like tripping out and then like thought he walked in there? Yeah, so we see him steal a human consciousness. There's several theories as to what that is. Obviously Ford is one. Bernard is another one. That's why he wakes up at the lake. And that's why when he says, "I killed them all," that's him remembering the last thing that Bernard's human consciousness, or that Arnold's human consciousness, would remember, which would be him ordering all the robots to kill themselves and then having Dolores kill him. There's also a big theory that William is somehow, even though he decommissioned Papadelos, right? Because it looked like, you know, Papadelos had been there for a while. It didn't look like those and that's even more strange, because it clearly showed Bernard killing all those people, but then didn't show him going to do something to Papadelos. So how long had Papadelos been there? Like, what's the timeline there? And so maybe he had been there for a while, and maybe William had decided to, you know, try out. You know, maybe William was dying, and so he's trying out a new host body. Maybe he like cloned his consciousness before he died, and now he's trying out a new host body. Maybe that's Ford's game for William, is this new stuff. And I think would be interesting, but they haven't really set the logical follow through for that. Because when he's saying like maybe, you know, all men shouldn't live forever, there's a clear parallel between Papadelos saying, you know, "I'm dying from a disease I defunded 15 years ago," and then basically William kills, everyone's dying from the disease of old age, right? No one can live forever, and William sort of kills that dream. And so I think it would be weird for them to have him go back and be like, "LOL, just kidding, I just wanted it for myself, dog." But we'll see. We'll definitely see. Trying to think if there was anything else. Oh, the scene in the town with the people that Teddy let go, where the whole like "I am death, I was sitting right across from you this whole time." That whole sequence was so fucking badass. So fucking good. I thought it was really, really, really well done. And just it characterized all this stuff, and even, you know, the little kid at the end, the creepy little kid, comes up and says like, you know, this isn't, you know, one good deed doesn't change anything. He's like, who said anything about a good deed? Basically inferring like he just like doesn't give a fuck, but maybe he kind of does give a fuck. But like that with like Lawrence's family and everything was so well acted, so well played. And I'm actually curious because, you know, Teddy let all those people go presumably because he thought like, oh, I'm saving them, I'm helping them, like they're like, I know that they're like have some sort of decency, right? Because now what happens when Dolores finds out that Teddy let them go and they immediately went and like shot up this town? Because there's already like that issue, you know, where she was like glaring at him like, I told you to kill these motherfuckers and you didn't. So I'm sure I would think it would be very strange if they didn't bring that plot point back, but maybe they won't. Maybe they won't revisit it. There is one thing that I thought was pretty cool that someone noted, was that the bartender's hand was shaking a lot. And they spent a lot of time on the fact that his hands were shaking. And if you noticed, Papadelos' hands were always shaking when he was like coming out. And so a lot of people are saying since Abernathy might not just be like a backup of Papa Delos, since they clearly had all his information there, but the code is the same. Maybe it's like Peter Abernathy had like the source code for the consciousness, right? It had like the back end structure for it. And then that Ford and Delos and all them, they all have multiple people around the park that are actually them. That's why Ford's able to communicate through all the kids, is that those are actually his consciousnesses in those kids, which doesn't make any sense because like they both had separate personalities other than Ford, but just some interesting food for thought. Wow, that one's long. Alright, that's going to be it for this week's Westworld review. As always, if you like these, let me know down in the comments below. If you have any thoughts, theories, anything like that, let me know in the comments as well. I'll definitely reply, and I'm always interested to hear what everyone has to say. So I'll catch you guys tomorrow.